Hey guys, this is CVC here and welcome to the first episode of Current Affairs for Rookies, the only show on the internet that breaks down history, politics and current events for newcomers to the field. So we've got a pretty juicy topic today, certainly one which you find people discussing over the dinner table or a few drinks or just as an excuse to show you they read the news. ISIS. No, not this ISIS. Not this one either. There we go. So what does ISIS stand for? The next time someone brings this topic up, ask them that. I found in my own experience that most people who expect you to agree with them have no idea. ISIS stands for Islamic State of Iraq and Syria. Alternatively, you also find people referring to it as ISIL, Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant. It's a jihadist militant group that adheres to Wahhabism. Wait, so what are these two terms now? The Levant and Wahhabism. Let's take the Levant first. It's a geographic location that essentially spans the entire eastern segment of the Mediterranean Sea. So in modern day usage, there are a number of countries that would fit into this box. Cyprus, Egypt, Iraq, Israel, Jordan, Lebanon, Palestine, Syria, and even Turkey have all been considered a part of the Levant at some point of time. And it's this area that ISIS eventually hopes to control and establish an Islamic caliphate in. Wahhabism, on the other hand, is a radical Islamic doctrine and a branch of Sunni Islam. What many people consider Islamic extremism today has deep roots in Wahhabism, such as a literalist interpretation of religious scripture, a need to crusade against polytheism and apostasy, and a medieval approach towards women's rights. While it's had a strong presence in the Middle East for 2 centuries, it was the oil money boom in the 70s which then prompted Wahhabism to go global through Saudi madrasas and teachers. Today, it's a worldwide ideology for which ISIS claims to be the only legitimate flag bearer, despite the brand ambassador and propagator of Wahhabism, Saudi Arabia, being an ally of the West and an enemy of ISIS. The genesis of ISIS goes back to 2 key aides of Osama bin Laden. This guy, Ayman al-Zawahiri, and this guy, Abu Musab al-Zarqawi. Zawahiri is the current leader of Al-Qaeda and the former right-hand man of Osama bin Laden. He was an Egyptian doctor and a highly educated man, much like bin Laden himself. He believed that before launching a direct attack for an Islamic state, the United States had to be vanquished first, as both he and bin Laden saw Uncle Sam as the most dangerous enemy around. He also urged repeatedly that before any jihadist movement wages all-out war for a caliphate, years had to be spent consolidating support for such a cause first. He was not in favor of open brutality that might alienate the public, such as beheadings and mass executions. Zarqawi, on the other hand, was a Jordanian jihadist who had far less patience and a tremendous capacity for violence. He founded the AQI, or Al-Qaeda in Iraq, which would eventually morph into ISIS. To him, the real enemy were Shia Muslims and the Sunnis who sided or cooperated with them. Sectarian warfare was a specialty, and it was Zarqawi who first made his name with public beheadings, a tactic that ISIS uses to great effect to this day. He was constantly at odds with Zawahiri over the participation of young Muslim fighters as well, whom he thought must lead the struggle. Zawahiri, though, constantly disagreed with him, calling his tactics too brutal and emphasizing on the need for patience. So at the foundation of ISIS lies the deep sense of impatience and contempt for Al-Qaeda, whom they see as not being active enough and dominated by old thinkers rather than young doers with a stomach for violence. In essence, it's a classic clash of the old and the young. Zarqawi was succeeded after his assassination in 2006 by this guy, Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, the current leader of ISIS and their proclaimed caliph. Following the death of bin Laden and the outbreak of Syrian civil wars, they parted ways permanently, with Islamic State becoming an independent, brutal, feared force. So what's the goal of ISIS? Some of you would have noticed earlier that I mentioned something called an Islamic caliphate. Now, a caliphate is a form of government that's run according to the principles of Islam and headed by a caliph, who is considered to be the leader of all Muslims. Throughout the history of the Islamic world, various caliphates have sprung up regularly, all of whom were powerful states in their own right. ISIS seeks to establish a Sunni Islam caliphate that spans the Levant and some say eventually the world, to be administered by their caliph, this guy again, according to fundamentalist Wahhabi principles. Why are we so fascinated by ISIS? Why does everything they tend to do end up on the news, while there are plenty of other insurgent groups in the world who are all but ignored? Firstly, ISIS fits into what we call a global narrative of conflict. They know what makes a compelling story and what would get them attention. They have a tremendous presence in social media and have become pretty sophisticated at getting themselves global exposure. Because we live in a post 9/11 age where the war on terror is our predominant security paradigm, news outlets all over the world have an incentive to cover their actions too. So, let's say ISIS and malaria killed the same number of people in a month. It wouldn't take a genius to guess which of the two we would all be talking about now. Secondly, ISIS has successfully inspired Muslim youth on a global scale. Al-Qaeda was inspiring too, but their emphasis on a distant war against the USA meant they relied on well-timed, well-selected attacks rather than all-out war. ISIS, on the other hand, is currently waging an armed struggle in both Iraq and Syria on a massive scale, and this has attracted a worryingly large number of disenfranchised Muslim youth from other countries and even other continents to come fight for them. It's estimated that over 30,000 fighters from over 100 countries have traveled to Iraq or Syria to join ISIS. And it has little to do with economic circumstances either. 5,000 of those foreign fighters are European Muslims. Another reason could be their sheer brutality. The atrocities committed by Islamic State, from burning non-believers alive to slaughtering children wholesale, is an inevitable talking point in today's world. They understand this and aren't likely to tone it down anytime soon, not with every media outlet in the world ready to project anything they do to the rest of us. Finally, we fear ISIS because they've already developed a track record of hitting urban targets in the Western world. While terrorist organizations have targeted cities before, like the Lashkar-e-Toiba in Mumbai or Boko Haram in Nairobi, ISIS is steadily building its capacity to use second-generation operatives to strike against the very countries they were raised in. The Charlie Hebdo attacks and the recent massacre in Paris are two prime examples of this, where the gunmen involved were French citizens themselves. Security experts in many Western countries fear that ISIS could soon replicate this model in a number of countries, which already have pockets of young Muslims whom the mainstream has failed to integrate. In closing, what you need to keep in mind about ISIS is that it's relevant. It's the latest phenomenon that everybody who follows current affairs wants to know about. It's the most dangerous, brutal, and notorious terrorist organization in the world. For now. If you like this episode, please hit the like button and subscribe to our channel. That would help me out a lot. This is CVC signing off, guys, and I'll see you soon with a fresh episode of Current Affairs for Rookies. Take care.